Hey everyone, I'm Stacey with NutritionJobs, and thank you for joining our LinkedIn event today. I am really excited to be able to talk about a topic that everyone wants to know about, and that is how to land more virtual speaking engagements. I have a really wonderful special guest with me today, Toni Toledo, who is a seasoned podcast host. And she is a dietitian who has both a traditional job, non-traditional job, but she has really shown herself to be an amazing virtual speaker. So welcome, Toni.
Thank you. How great is this? I'm looking at this screen of the two of us next to each other and realizing just how the universe has conspired for this collaboration. So I'm thrilled. Thank you, Stacey.
I know. So you and I met several years ago at a local dietetic association meeting, an in-person meeting. It was just before the quarantine, before COVID-19 lockdown. We did the in-person talk, and I just loved everything that you talked about. You talked about how to have a podcast. I talked about LinkedIn. It was like a month or two later, we went into lockdown, and of course I could no longer do in-person talks and presentations and conferences, but I sort of found the world of virtual speaking. But I watched you explode in the world of virtual speaking as a dietitian. You have been on fire, I really think, since then. And I'm just going to show, I think you've done a lot of really interesting topics. And that's what I want to go in today. I'm going to sort of quiz you on how you got to be so good at public speaking, how you got to get this number of engagements for public speaking virtually, and what's been sort of what you have learned and how you can then share that with all of us. But I'm going to start off by saying, I've listened to a lot of your talks, and I find you to be very relaxing and engaging, and you're full of brilliant words and information. You really have good stuff. So I would love for you to share how it is that you got involved in virtual speaking in the first place, and how you got involved in your world as a dietitian. Maybe you can just give a little bit of a background for everybody.
Okay. Well, thank you for the very nice compliment. I will say that my experience as a dietitian briefly, has been varied. I bounced all around. I've lived in different parts of the country and traveled a lot internationally. And I think that has informed not just who I am, but how that shows up as a professional. And I think that exposure to different places and people and different cultures drove me or pulled me into public health. So I've been living in the public health space, working in the public health space off and on for over 30 years. And that has involved all kinds of crazy stuff, whether it's direct service, in the research world, also, doing studies similar to your work, let's say, your previous work with Ornish, but at Stanford and at University of Minnesota. Then I did a lot of direct service in behavior change. I'm a behavior change junkie, so that plays into all of this as well. I have also done private practice, a lot of different areas in the world of nutrition, but mostly in that public health sphere, I would say. All of those, program development, miscellaneous. And now I'm working, teaching at San Jose State. I have the podcast. And then I also am working with the medically tailored meals program, which is a brand new area for me. So it's kind of wild. I'm learning a lot in this pioneered, new area. But all that to say that each one of these roles and jobs has involved what I would call little PS, public speaking. You kind of do the public speaking when you're at the table with the constituents, or you're looking across the table at a client or a patient or what have you. And I think that what has happened over the years is my love of sharing insights and provoking thought and conversation and behavior change have all kind of come together with the pod. Especially the podcast was just a titanic, change in my career. And I think that has all led to this ability to share the word, spread the word. It started with just the podcast me really just wanting other dietitians to create podcasts. That was it. That's when I met you. And then it sort of evolved into other areas, and it's been rather organic and natural. That is not to say easy, but that has been rather organic, and it's really stemmed from connecting to people, meeting new people, and combining some of these threads that I just shared with you earlier that have sort of surfaced in this little fabric now, which is doing just what you said, a lot more public speaking, and I love it. I love it so much.
I like that you said that it doesn't come easy, because I think listening to you give a presentation, it sounds easy. It's easy to listen to, and you just have this confidence and this ease. And I think that's what makes you attractive to get speaking engagements. So let me just ask you, let me back up a bit. How many speaking engagements would you say you are either asked to do or you are volunteering to do in maybe a span of a month?
I would say 2 to 3. Now, part of that is because I do have, my jobs that I teach at San Jose State, and then the Teen Kitchen Project, which are both part-time, but, require focus and effort. The podcast is floating around as well, which is a full passion project. I also teach for the CDR's Pediatric and Adult Weight Management Program, which threads into the public speaking as well, because that's what that job is public speaking and training. And then as an Ascend reviewer, I end up doing some public speaking too. So I say all those things not to sound, braggadocious. That's not the point. It's the public speaking shows up in unique ways. And then these talks sort of pepper in as they fit with my schedule and as interest allows, if that makes sense.
Yeah, totally makes sense. Yeah, I understand what you're saying, that it sounds like you get a lot of practice just in your day-to-day work, which I think is true of a lot of dietitians as well. We are communicating, a lot of it's verbally, with our client, or maybe with our peers, maybe in a hospital setting or outside of that. I think that's very common. But what I have found interesting in watching your career over the last couple of years is the areas that you speak on, that you're not just talking about vitamin A, right? You're talking about something really different and very interesting. And I think and I'll just sort of layer on that. I think that you're really good at collaborating. I think you're really good with people. I think you're very unique that way. And I don't know if that helps dictate what your niche is going to be, but maybe you could speak a little bit about how you come up with the topics, what niche you have found for yourself. So, for example, you are presenting this week at the Dietitian Entrepreneur Symposium, as you often do, on really interesting topics. I just did a screenshot of the one that you're doing currently on leveling up as a leader, as a dietitian. So, tell me a little bit more about how you have found your speaking niche, and maybe how get people thinking about how they can find their own speaking niche.
Great. Well, I would say first and foremost, this has come from trying to be very aware and connected to myself as a person and as a dietitian, clinician, professional, because most of these topics have come from just natural interest or where my life has sort of been going over the years. Again, the pod has been a big catapult, but then I think from the pod, we were just collaborating with so many people that it made sense to talk about collaborations and promote and enlist and shout from the rooftops, because I feel so strongly about us, as dietitians working together and lifting each other up. So you could probably see the veins in my neck pop up, because I feel very passionate about that. So passion drives it, interest drives it. The people that I interact with, I try to pay really close attention to who I'm connecting to in my work, through social media, in my life, and try to pull from that, as well as what's in my heart and in my head. I listen to a lot of podcasts. I try to explore a lot of different perspectives, and it might even be like things I'm reading. Like right now, I just started The Creative Act, A Way of Being, which is Rick Rubin's new book. And I'm like, what the heck? There's something in here that is speaking to me for where I am right now in my life. And I don't know if that's going to be a topic, but it could very well be, because things are floating around all of us all the time. So leadership, this one came about through the back door, Stacey. It was that I was turning out to be kind of a reluctant leader, at the time. And I'm like, wow, I probably should talk about this because we are all leaders in our own ways. How can I tap into that again to inspire and motivate, but empower? Because I think as humans, we need it. So I just try to pay very close attention to what's in my heart, in my head, and around me, the people I'm with, what interests me. And I think I have full respect. You mentioned vitamin A, I think. I have so much respect for the dietitians who are so great at what they do, whether it's nutrition support or, in the renal space or, clinical, outpatient, WIC, you name it. And I think that leaning into what you are good at and what interests you and brings you joy is, or maybe what makes you different. Those are all things to pay attention to.
I think being different as definition is the niche. I think that is what's different. Yeah.
Oh, good point.
So thank you for all that. That was really interesting. I'm always curious, like what inspires people or how they get different creative thoughts, or and it sounds like I too am very energized by listening to other podcasts, getting ideas. I don't know, maybe it's the process of what I'm doing while I'm listening to the podcast. I'm either usually running or taking my dog on a walk, and so I'm outside. My eyesight is far away, and I can really internalize a lot of creativity. And how do you, what sort of spawns your creativity?
Oh, similarly, I mean, of course, pods, what I'm reading, what I'm listening to. Sometimes it's, projects at work or, things that people ask me about. And oftentimes it's even those things that people will ask me about that I go, uh-oh, I don't know much about that. I better dig in here. It's a weak spot to learn to fill out my experience or grow that way. But I try to just be very cognizant of what's out there, what the conversations are. Like, for example, on this slide, this lovely human, Joyce Schulman, it was just random. I called her to be on our podcast. Next thing I knew, we were just, crushing on each other because of what we do in our work. And I've been on her pod a couple times, and even preparing, she might throw out a topic to me, but then I get to make it mine and make it go through the Toni filter, which I think is something I strive to do and allow for that unique and creative angle. Because like you said, that's one thing I can own is, thank God there's only one of me, but there's only one. So I try to harness some of that.
Thank you for that. That was good. Okay, I'm going to get into some nuts and bolts about how everyone can implement and be just like you. All right, let me ask, how often are you out there reaching out to present on something, or asking if you can present, like you're applying, or an application maybe to Fancy or for the RD Entrepreneur Symposium, versus, and how you're attracting people to find you? Like how does that work for you?
So I would answer it this way. For me, again, you'll probably notice a theme. A lot of this is very organic. And so I kind of think about this in two ways. There's sort of a passive way of this occurring, and then there's an active way. So the passive for me is kind of the conversations, like I said, the people in my circle, my colleagues, that kind of thing. Just mentioning that I do talks, or people bring it up, and I try to share and demystify and encourage other people to do it. And sometimes that turns into an invitation as well. Active for me is when I've got my, peepers out, and I'm looking at RFPs that are out there. I'm looking at webinars that are coming around. On Instagram, I follow a lot of dietetic associations just to see what people are doing, local, state, and otherwise. So sometimes there's a promotion out and I toss my hat in the ring. Webinars, all of that. I'm just like, if the theme of if you see the artwork and it has a theme for the event and it resonates, then I will go to the website and look at the request for a proposal, the speaking invitation, the application, and just kind of get a sense of how it lands for me. If I think I either A, have something already developed that I could customize, or B, push myself out of my comfort zone to take on a new topic. So those are kind of the two categories, active and passive, but really, I don't spend much time, Stacey, on that at all. It's sort of like what the universe is sending around.
Well, I think it sort of snowballs, once you start getting speaking engagements, then they start, you're attracted to presenting, or people are attracted to you to request a presentation. But one thing I did hear you say is that you're really networking. You're really out there actively networking, and that active networking can allow you to receive some passive invitations. So that's very active, and I like how you're doing that. And then also, of course, looking and sort of harvesting opportunities, I think is really good. I'm going to give you a shout out for the work that you do on LinkedIn, because I love LinkedIn, and I think that all dietitians should show up on there and be able to take advantage of all of the free marketing tools that are on LinkedIn. Even if you have a traditional job, like you have a traditional job, and you also have a couple interesting niches, side gigs, and whatever you want to call it, side interests. And I just want to point out, this is Toni's LinkedIn profile on her personal profile. And you can see that she's got right on there, virtual speaker. That is a key word that other people can find when they are entering in the search query looking for, a speaker or virtual speaker. Because, this is what's interesting is I know you and I have spoken. We've been on presentations together. We've been on conferences together. You speak, but if I didn't know that you wanted to be a virtual speaker, I may not always think of you to present on something. Or that might be true of another organization or a group that wanted to. So I wouldn't even know that you would like to talk about this, but you are advertising that this is one of your services. This is something that you enjoy doing. You have a calling for it. You're good at it, and you can provide it. So I think just putting that on your profiles, everybody, virtual speaker, and then you can, say all the other stuff in there too. Even if it's a traditional job, you're a clinical dietitian at a hospital,
Mhm.
but in there also that you're a virtual speaker, that you're available for that. So I wanted to give you a call out on that. The other thing I wanted to call out, so her podcast is the Path Positive Approaches to Health, and she has created a company page for that. So you can also do that for your virtual speaking gig or a business that you want to have on the side. Even if you only do one presentation a year or you do one presentation a week, like all of that really counts. And you've got this free real estate, searchable real estate on LinkedIn. So I wanted to call you out and say, I think that's really awesome that you are doing that. And I wanted just to bring attention to what. So let me just ask then, what advice do you have for us to show up on LinkedIn or other social media outlets to attract more virtual speaking engagements?
So first of all, flowers to you, because none of this would exist if it wasn't for you. Because when I met you, I think I had a picture on LinkedIn and maybe 3 people. Like I really didn't have much going on. And so I went to every single thing that you had, every opportunity that you shared, a little bit of back channel asking questions. And I just would say, you are a huge resource for all of us. And so, I tell people about you all the time. I think my kids are tired of even hearing about you, but it's okay. So that LinkedIn, and I will just say too, that the LinkedIn connection, I may do a little changing even by looking at that, because I have received requests for being a keynote speaker as a result of that page.
Yeah, that's awesome.
It's
That is
nuts.
fantastic. Yeah. So you could put on there keynote speaker, or you do it one time and now you are a keynote speaker, right? We could put together
Right.
a conference, you'll be my keynote speaker, and now you're a keynote speaker.
Yeah, and I was nervous when the invitation came through, because I'm like, I'm not sure I'm that person. And, I was like, all right, let me just go for it. And, I laid everything out for what I could provide, and it was a great experience. But yeah, I think that it's an evolution that changes over time and could get more polished and developed. So just a quick little side note there. I would say, for me, I'm not on Facebook, but I know that that's a great resource for people. Everybody, clamors about it. It's just a choice that I've made. But even on Instagram, I only went on Instagram for our podcast. Before, I had 0 social media. And so I've just allowed myself the runway to learn it and get familiar with it, show up as myself and my co-host. I try to show our authentic, personalities, who we are and what we believe in. And through Instagram, really so many relationships have developed. I have gotten connected to a myriad different people in different fields and disciplines. And sometimes I do cold calls. Sometimes it's by hook or crook, somebody knows someone, or I've met them at a conference or a webinar. And it's been a wonderful way, a great conduit for connection, and therefore has led to quite a few speaking engagements for me. So I know there are other methods, but those are kind of the biggies: LinkedIn and Instagram, and then just basically any chance I can to spread the word in person with people, I do that as well.
I think you're right. I always forget about some of the other channels, but having that information in your bio, whether it's LinkedIn, Facebook, Twitter, YouTube as well, like you can have a recording of your presentations. You can actually create a Zoom recording of yourself giving a talk, and it could just be you in the corner and your slides. And that can go up onto your LinkedIn profile as an example, maybe some featured section at the featured section where you show what you do and how you are available as a virtual speaker. But the same goes for Facebook, having that in your profile, having that in your bio, like who you are, your headline, whatever you want to call it, saying that you're a speaker, that you're available for it, and this is how they can contact you. I personally so I have virtual speaker also in my LinkedIn headline, and I get a lot of messages or DMs through my LinkedIn account, also through my Instagram account, but a lot through LinkedIn asking for me to give a talk someplace. So I think that's, again, it's just putting yourself out there and sort of being a magnet for these opportunities. Again, even if you've only done like one a year, you are still a speaker, and it's a great way to highlight the work that you're doing. So I like to give talks because I like to connect with my community. I work in a vacuum. I work, it's a virtual world that I've created with NutritionJobs. So I like to be able to connect. I also like to bring more eyeballs to my business, to the job postings, to the blog articles, to the courses that I have. And that's why I like to give talks, to bring some more traffic over there. But there's a lot of other reasons why somebody would want to give a talk as a dietitian. Toni, what are some of your whys? How do you like to uh, serve your business or your professional self with your talks?
So you just said connect, and truly connect is what courses through my veins. It's just a joy force multiplier for me in my field and in my life. And I love to meet new people. I love to push myself to grow and learn. I love to bring more people to our podcast and that sort of thing. But for me, it really settles in with inspiring, empowering, connecting. Like I said, if there's a way to do that, that's a huge motivator. I mean, truly, the money part is great, and it's been a icing on the cake, so to speak. But that has been a fun, side project, that I could save and stow away for a trip or whatever. It's just kind of not been the big motivator, but it's really nice, and I think that I'm getting to the point right now where I'm having to even reassess what I'm saying is my fee and things like that. So things are changing. But I just try to really think about, does this group or person who's asking me to come speak, is this something that's aligned with me? Will it be something that I can create connections and achieve some of those other things I mentioned? Then the answer is yes. So those are some of the whys that pull me in. Plus, I just feel like growing and learning throughout I'm 30 plus years into this career, and I do not see slowing down, in part because of experiences like this. I'm just kind of filling out as a human, and I think these things are helping me do that. The speaking engagements and collaborations and connections made. So it's real gold to me.
Yeah, I agree. I agree with what you've said as well, and I can hear that in your presentations as
Mm.
well. And I think that is good. So virtual speakers or keynote speakers, people who do it in person, but we're going to sort of focus on virtual. A lot of them have like what's called a speaker sheet that has information. It's sort of like a media kit for a media dietitian, where it has their past presentations that they've given, or what they can focus on, or sort of like a little menu of what a company could use. And I think Toastmasters gives some information on that. I think that the Dale Carnegie Institute for Public Speaking, I think they have that as well. Have you ever used a speaker info sheet?
That is so funny because my co-host and I both have been kind of tiptoeing around it because it felt like such a Herculean effort to do it. And we just had some guests on our podcast that have a huge podcast. They're very famous. And they sent us a one-pager that was so succinct and clean. And it made both Jenny and I realize, oh my gosh, we can do this. So we're in the process right now of putting that together. And it's been on the list for years. And so we're right there.
I think if you were to turn that into a Canva template, I think people would buy it from you.
Oh my gosh, what?
I
That's
think
funny.
because we need to know how to create these speaker sheets. You don't want to put your prices on there, by the way,
All right.
that way that you can charge always more for each subsequent presentation that you give. So don't always advertise your prices. And that comes also from Amy Gorin of Master the Media. Same goes when you're a media dietitian. Don't publish your prices, your rates, because there's going to be different elements to make it easier or less easy or more complicated or more involved or takes up more of your time. And don't think of the honorarium that you charge or that's available to you to be about just, if you're giving a half-hour presentation, you're not going to be charging the half hour, right? There's all the work and the research and the preparation that goes into it. So think of it that way. So speaking of, I don't talk too much about the money part because that's going to really vary a lot.
Yeah.
But I'll just say that every time that I've given a talk, I always raise the rate for the next person. So, it can range from like $100 to $500 to $2,000 to $10,000. So it really varies on the person. So, the other thing I will say is that I will always ask, regardless of who the person is that I'm giving a presentation for, I will always ask is there money, is there an honorarium available? You're not asking for money out of that person's pocket. You're dealing with somebody who works for the company or the organization or the group of people. The money's not coming out of their pocket necessarily. So it's okay to ask for money. It's okay to feel free to get something out of it. You can always ask for money that comes out of a grant. I've done that. It's a little more work, but it is certainly worth it. And I think it just helps for each subsequent talk that you do. And the other thing is, don't undercharge, because if you're undercharging, then they think like there's something wrong with the way that you present, or that maybe they've made a mistake in having you present to them, because maybe you've never really done it that much when you're only charging $100 or $500 or whatever it is for the presentation. So, all right. So let me get back into the nuts and bolts then. So a lot of people, when they hear the word public speaking, they just start sweating. Right?
Mhm.
And I think you're really good about sharing this confidence with us that puts us as the audience at ease. But I really want to know your technique. What's your craft for creating this confidence, or how do you prepare for a presentation, a virtual presentation, either the day of or behind the scenes? How does that work for you that you can share with us?
Okay, so first of all, wait till you get my invoice for today. Speaking of fees, just stay, be
We'll sit
sitting.
right on that.
No, just kidding. We just did a podcast and we titled it this. And I realized in preparing for today that this term applies to my process of creating talks, and that is beautiful mess, because it really is a beautiful mess, trying to capture what the theme is, what I'm invited to speak about, or what I'm deciding to speak about. Again, whether or not it's something I've crafted and then I need to personalize, customize for the audience, the new group, the attendees, or if it's something brand new. I have to allow for the mess, because it is, just for me, messy. I go through sort of my inspiration phase where I'm just like bringing things in, ideas, materials. I get a blank slide deck and I just sort of park things there for a while. I come and go. It's like I dance with it for a long time. I sleep on it a lot. I allow for it to be completely tossed. In fact, the last leadership talk I did, I think I reached out to you because I was gonna pull some from you. And then like the next morning I woke up and I was like, actually, I'm going a whole different way. And so, affording myself grace and patience if it changes. The iterations are key for me. But again, I really think about, okay, how do I make this me? How do I make it come across through the Toni filter with Toni style while being professional and engaging? I try to incorporate a good kind of intro and some sort of theme that threads through it. That's not just for the attendees, it's for me too, because then it makes it more fun and more natural, and I can have a little bit of creative freedom and excitement about it. But I do allow for a lot of edits, I'll have friends look at them for me. And I often, because I'm already tired of hearing my own voice today, I get very tired of hearing my own voice, that I will reach out to people who I think are really leaders in this field or whatever area I'm talking about, and I'll incorporate voices from them, which I think it could be testimonials, usually like on a slide. I've done that with Stacey, because I think that adds a little dimension, variety, and interest, to make sure it's not just me, looking through this one tube. We're getting other perspectives. So, I mean, those are some of the things that I do. And I just really try to keep myself in it, not make it about me, but make myself in part of the process, because then I feel like I am authentic and I'm really showing my whole, being with whatever topic this is that I am presenting on. Does that make sense, Stacey?
That totally makes sense. Yes. What about like day of nerves? Like, do you get anxious about it, or do you have any rituals? Or for me, it's a lot of chapstick.
Oh
If
my
I
God,
start the
that's
presentation and I forgot to grab my chapstick, like, oh, I'm
hilarious.
doomed.
That's funny. Yes, I have total funny little traditions and rituals. I make a point to pick like a color that it feels like where I'm at today, or sometimes when I've been dragging a color that represents where I want to be. I have this purple dress. I call it my Donny Osmond dress, and of course the people are only seeing from here up, but I have yellow, green, purples. I try to either connect to where I am or where I would like to be when I'm presenting. I go for a run or a walk. I channel. I do a little dress rehearsal. I check my machine, make sure all my equipment's working. I have a walk-up song. I think I sent mine to you.
I like that. I think that's genius. I think I also heard that from Amy Porterfield talking about Tony Robbins. And before he goes in, they like crank up the music. There's like a particular song I think both of them use before they're going to meet with a live audience.
Oh,
I think
wow.
the pressure is even higher. But I think actually the pressure is high when you're just talking to that little lens, right? Like,
Yeah.
talking to a lot of people, you want to connect with people, but you want to have the energy. I think that is actually a challenge of virtual speaking, is trying to maintain that energy. I can see just a handful of us, and so I have to like visualize, but I love the idea of getting pumped up with some music. That is really awesome. And accordingly, big famous important speakers do the same.
Funny, yeah. No, it's just funny little things. I also, for the jitters, I will do, this is going to sound funny, but I like to vacuum. So like just 20 minutes before I logged on, my son's watching the Giants opening day and I'm zipping past him with the vacuum, because it's honoring my true condition. I feel a little anxious or nervous, and I just find something that's like mindless. And so, I'll do little things like that work for me, that kind of just bring me back and allow me to say, okay, you can be a little nervous. You can be a little jittery. What are the things that get the zoomies out or the wiggles out, and then try to show up, a little nervous, but, not like frozen.
Exactly. And I think that's important, is to create those rituals so that you can kind of smooth out whether it's with activity or with noise or with just a routine. I grab my tea, I sit myself down, I get everyone out and get the chapstick. And it's the same thing. I don't know that it's really impacting, but it just sort of allows me to smooth out and to then be able to, present and kind of get into that mindset. So I know that there is a famous billionaire who's actually in the news right now, but so Warren Buffett said that learning public speaking will improve your worth by 50%. And it turns out it was because he was afraid of public speaking and he took a class to improve that as a business skill. So I think, speaking to other people is really important, but I think the idea of practicing and preparing for your presentation and knowing what you're going to say, I think that's really crucial to being able to help with your confidence level. So, I don't know if you had any other thoughts on if someone is apprehensive. So, not necessarily what you do for yourself, but what advice might you give to somebody else who is interested in giving a public presentation or wants to start a career this way or a side hustle? How would you recommend they start feeling more confident and sort of push themselves off that cliff of public speaking?
So I think that, the bottom line is we need to give ourselves that grace that if we are apprehensive and, maybe going back to behavior change basics, but maybe thinking about like the stages of change and really thinking about honoring, maybe you're contemplating and you want to. So what are some things that you could do to kind of work your way forward? Maybe it's attending more virtual things and looking for what you like, what interests you, the different styles you see, all while remembering I'm me. So what is it that I bring? And sitting with that and maybe creating an inventory of the things that interest you, the things that you are good at, some of your special skills, and pinging your friends, your coworkers, your family members, whoever, to help you create a list of things that makes you someone who should have your voice out there. And I think, again, all while honoring what inspires you, what's around you, and also working to tolerate the discomfort of putting yourself out there. Because truth be told, I have to remind myself of that every time I go to speak. I'm inviting this because it helps me, and I am going to be uncomfortable. I really hate seeing like my eyebrows go up and down and how many gestures, facial gestures I have, but I've allowed myself that. It's part of who I am. And so, it's just kind of I have found it to be an evolution, but one that requires checking in, doing some work, and nudging, yourself toward doing more of this. And it could look like maybe being on a panel or hosting possibly at a local event so that you get that experience, moderating, like you mentioned, Toastmasters. I mean, there's various ways you can do this. And I do think DPGs, dietetic practice groups, are a great way to do this at a smaller level and throw yourself, into the mix and see what happens.
I think that you can also leverage the LinkedIn events. So let's say you do want to have a side hustle as a virtual speaker on the topic of lactation consulting or something, for example.
Mhm.
Yeah, so traditional, sort of traditional work doesn't have to be B2B, or you're talking to another dietitian, you're talking to other consumers. You can start creating an event and start speaking, just doing it just like this. And then you start having this, repertoire of all these different talks. You've had different topics. You get used to the idea of inviting people. LinkedIn does all the work for this. Isn't like a promo for LinkedIn, but they do all the work of inviting out. You just put it out there. You put it onto your whether you do it for your company page or whether you do it for your personal profile. They will then do all the advertising and remind people about it. So they sort of take care of that marketing part in the end. You can have one person that's part of that, but then you can save that as a recording or live streamed recording, whatever it might be, or even doing they have the audio version now. So you get sort of used to having this conversation kind of in a vacuum where you're not really talking. I think that's the biggest difference between an in-person presentation where you often have a moderator or someone sort of holding your hand, or you can sort of tether yourself to the audience. But a virtual talk, you're in isolation, and that's kind of weird for the first few times if you're not used to doing that or haven't done it that many times. So I think having some more practice is really helpful. When I give a talk, I practice it over and over and over so that it becomes like a story to me.
Mhm.
So one of the questions that came up in the chat was, again, a more practical question is, how do you actually deliver your presentation? Do you memorize it, or do you have bullet points that remind you, or what's your process?
Okay, I'm going to answer that in one sec. I want to tag on two quick things to what you just said, though, before we get there. And that is, being on other people's podcasts is a great way to get warmed up with speaking, because you still want to prepare and sort of do some of the nuts and bolts of what you would be doing visually online or otherwise. The other thing is, I don't do these, but I have been a guest on Instagram Lives, which are sort of smaller, lower stakes versions of something like this. So just thoughts about that, I want to make sure I mention. So the question was, how to, sorry, got to go back to that.
How do you actually give the presentation? Do you memorize most of it so that it, sort of becomes rote? Do you just use bullet points, or do you are you like really good at just like knowing the whole, let's say you're giving a 45-minute talk, how much of that would you memorize?
So I do a series of things, but I do, like I mentioned, I set up my slide deck. I try to get those choice words on the slide deck to serve in a lot of ways for me to go from the information to conversation sounding, because that's the goal of my style. That involves a lot of practice. I print out the slide. Don't judge me for using paper, but I do print out the slides, and then I make notes for myself. I do practice in front of a mirror. I do sometimes put on Zoom and I practice it in Zoom and record it and come back and see how I'm doing there. I often have like little notes, like right now I have some little notes just available if need be. I've had friends who've done this, I might try this next time, who have like a little string that comes down behind their computer that has notes on it for them, which is just cues and things like that. But I try it personally to get mastery of the material, let's say 70% of it that I could speak to, naturally. And then I have prompts and things like that along with practice and, these other methods here. But I try not to paint myself in a corner to have it be so memorized, because I know for me that sometimes what happens is some of me is lost in that, my natural little quirky characteristics that might come up when I own it, and then I'm able to elaborate a little bit more.
I've done presentations that were very detail oriented, that had a lot of specific numbers, stats, things I wasn't going to be able to memorize. And I would tape them to the side of the frame of like right in front on both sides, and then have like one up above me. But I've also done the technique of having all of your notes and then just sort of reading from that. And I had this one really bad experience where it was a very detailed presentation. I think it was more nutrition related rather than the type of work that I'm doing now. And of course, my pages got messed up. And so then you find yourself having, three conversations in your head. The topic, you're like, oh no, I can't believe this is happening to me. And then this other person is saying, you're on page 4, find page 4, like it's too much information. And then you're not serving your people that you're giving a presentation to. So I like to really memorize it, just like a story, like you've had stories of maybe something that happened to your family on spring break, someone fell off the boat, or, whatever it is. And you kind of laugh about that later. And the story, you memorize it, you tell other people, you keep telling the same story. Maybe it gets a little more flowery each time, but you end up telling the story. And you don't really get tired of telling the story like you do preparing for a talk, but you kind of have to think of it that way. I think that really helps, and to really get it down so that you can bring forward, so you can have another person, there's the person giving the talk, there's the other person that's like, make sure you smile, make sure you're saying things authentically. There's all these little yous coming out during a virtual presentation. I want to step back to one other topic, back to the money part. So I know that it's important to give free talks or low paying talks in addition to like the high paying ones. What's your thought about the free talks?
So the free talks, I will do, and I've really forced myself to pause when the invitations come through, to really just give myself space to say, well, let me think about that. I used to be like, when is it? Okay. I just had this whole like pleaser thing that was, kind of over the top. So I give myself time, I ask for time, I really sit with it and think about, is this something that I either could learn more and polish up my skills or learn a new area, make some new colleagues, collaborators, what are the end products of this? Not to be selfish, but to really assess. But if it's something that I just feel like the audience is just, like something I believe in and I want to contribute, yes, of course. And there have been times when I've said, I can do this one. And then if you bring me back, I do have a fee schedule, or, I might go that route. So I'm being a bit more judicious just because I don't have a ton of bandwidth, but I always try to make sure my heart and head are married up. And I think about the time that I put into these. I put in a lot of time. So, it needs to have a value to my community or some sort of current, immediate, or future value for myself. Something has to be in there for me to do it for free.
I agree. I just heard another speaker talk about this. They said, well, they're very, this is what sort of what they do full time. So it might be different than a lot of us out in the audience, but they said that there is one seat on the plane, and each day of the week, represents, or each speaking presentation represents like one flight, one seat. And what he will often do, if it's a no paying or low paying, or he knows that there will be business that gets generated from that, he wants to do that. But if he is offered a $10,000 gig on May 1st and has already committed to giving a free talk to somebody also on May 1st, he doesn't want to go back to the free talk person and say, I'm sorry, I'm out of here. So what he'll say instead is, I understand you are not able to provide my usual honorarium. And so therefore I am going to pencil you in. And if I don't get a speaking engagement on May 1st within, I think he said within 60 days, then we're a go. Like, if no one else wants that seat for $10,000, then you and I are a go for May 1st with no honorarium. So I like that. It was like honoring them, but being really upfront with them, saying, and people who can't pay the honorarium would totally understand that as well. So that I thought was interesting perspective. All right, what I just realized you and I could just like on and on and on. People have to get back to work. Tell me, what is the future of virtual speaking for dietitians?
Well, it's the future is bright, and I think that virtual is the future. Hybrid is the future. We're going back in person. That's the future. There's room for all of it, and I see it all showing up in some really, really creative ways. I think that this is never, the genie's out of the bottle, and we're out there. And I just love having this as a skill and a one of the dimensions of my career, my professional career. And I think that it is such a safe way to get out there. And I have this image in my mind. I did a talk years ago with some colleagues, and we were all green. We were brand new, young dietitians, and they're three good friends, and we were presenting this thing at a state conference or something. And my girlfriend Denise was standing there, and her legs were shaking incessantly. They were just like jiggling the whole time behind the podium. And she was thanking, the gods above that she had a podium to be in front of. And I thought, oh, you know what? It's sort of similar now. Like, you wouldn't know if below my toe was tapping, or I had, it's forgiving. The virtual format can be very forgiving. And so we can use a lot of tools. We have ways to engage and really make these things interesting, whether it's Q&A and polls and all the cool stuff that's coming through, virtual conversations. And I just feel like, the gold standard for me, because I'm a people person, will always be face-to-face next to each other. But this has been a delightful and a cool way to have access and grow as a person and as a professional.
Yeah, I agree. I agree with you. Our mutual friend, Jessica Setnick, sent this to both of us, I believe. So she's got a really great book called The Dietitian's Guide to Professional Speaking. It's really fun. It's a really great book. I love it. I just got it, so I haven't gone through the whole thing, but there's some good details in there for you. And what else was I going to mention? Well, I've got lots of courses that you guys all know about, but lots of courses on how to develop your professional version of yourself, whether you are applying for a job or pitching for new business or whatever it might be, to help spiff up your LinkedIn profile, your company page, and also your resume. I've got lots of resume templates that are also available on my site. And do not forget to download your LinkedIn profile checklist to make sure that you're doing everything to help LinkedIn be able to find you and get more business. As this is going to be on YouTube, please subscribe to my YouTube channel And you can also set up your resume profile on NutritionJobs. And we've got lots of great jobs, lots of good stuff over there as well. Uh, Toni, thank you. Didn't put a slide in here for you. How can people find you?
So on LinkedIn, just do a search. You can find me with my name, just Toni Toledo. I am at the Path Pod, which is where our podcast is. Also, did I say Instagram? Yeah, I don't have a whole lot of social media, but you can reach me through a DM through the Path Pod on Instagram or through LinkedIn DMs. I just wanted to say really quickly, if I could add one more thing, Stacey.
Please do.
And that is that I realize we're all such different people with different characteristics and qualities and comfort levels when it comes to speaking. I think at the end of the day, anyone who goes into nutrition, dietitians in particular, because of the training we have, we're already storytellers. We tell stories through case studies and through, our counseling sessions. And I mean, we have so many ways we tell stories all the time that if this feels like something it is out of reach for you, I would look at what you do day to day and look at how that passion manifests and see if there's a way to link that toward virtual or any kind of speaking. But don't deny that that's really something that we have going for us. And we are so buttoned up and we have so many great skills that we should be out there doing this work. So I just wanted to put that one little plea out there and little conversation starter there.
I agree. I mean, I think dietitians are fantastic virtual speakers, in person, virtual. I think we're really great at being able to communicate information, whether it's science to consumers or whether it's information to help other dietitians be more successful in their careers, whatever it might be. I think dietitians are perfect for being able to be in the speaking world. So thank you, Toni, so much for the work that you're doing as a dietitian for our profession and for sharing your knowledge on virtual speaking with us today.
It's super fun. You can't ever get rid of me, Stacey. So just know
I'm
that.
glad. All right, I'm going to end the recording.
Bye.